Everyone talks about doing a PhD like it's this glamorous journey reserved for only the smartest people in the room. You see the doctor title on LinkedIn and Twitter, and you assume the person never fails, never struggles, and has a brain size double of an average human being. But I do think it's more important to talk about the reality of doing a PhD. So in this video, I'm going to bust some myths about doing a PhD. Not to scare you, but to help you manage your expectations so you don't walk into the lab on day one thinking you're going to be Einstein. Hi, if you're new here, my name's Aku. I'm a second year neuroscience PhD student studying in London. And I get questions all the time about the student reality. So let's get into it. Number 1, do not believe the myth that you need to be a genius to do a PhD. And honestly, this is probably the biggest barrier for people even applying. You look at your supervisors or those intimidating postdocs who seem to know the answer to everything, and you just think, well, this can never be me. But here's the honest truth. A PhD is not a test about your raw intelligence. It's mainly about how much you love research and how much time and effort you're willing to put into it. Most of the times, people who do succeed in academia aren't always the ones who got 100% on every single undergrad test. They're the ones who can handle failure again and again and still show up every day. In biology especially, experiments can fail a lot. Your cells can get contaminated, equipment breaks, or you realise 6 months in that you're using the wrong antibody. If you're a genius who's never struggled to understand something, well then a PhD can actually break you. Because suddenly, the answer is not at the back of the textbook. You actually need to find the answer, and usually the path is just full of dead ends. So, do you actually need to be the smartest person in the room? No, but you do need to be the most stubborn. It's about resilience, not just IQ. You have to be willing to look stupid, ask questions, and be wrong. Don't get me wrong, you need to be competent, you just don't need to be perfect. And that brings me to my second point, the myth of the lonely scientist. Many people have this image in their head of a scientist locked in the basement all day, only talking to the mice or his cells, completely cut off from society. And while it is true that you need to be comfortable working independently, as you will have your own project, this idea of that you'll always be lonely is not really true. Modern science is incredibly collaborative. In my lab, I'm constantly asking for help, troubleshooting with other students, or presenting my data to my supervisors. You literally cannot do this alone. You need people to teach you techniques. For example, I don't know how to grow organoids just by intuition. Someone had to show me. You need people to critique your work, and also just someone to vent to when things go wrong. A huge part of a PhD is learning how to communicate your science and to build a network. It's not just you against the world. So if you're worried about being a hermit for 3 to 4 years, that's really up to you. You do have to make an effort, but the community is always there. And this brings me to a very practical point, money. There's a weird notion out there where some people think, oh, you're going to be a doctor, you must earn loads of money. And other people think, wow, PhD students are starving and eating pot noodles every night. The truth is somewhere in the middle, but leaning more towards the side where you do need to budget. Most PhDs, especially here in the UK, are fully funded, meaning you do get a tax-free stipend, you aren't paying for school, and you get a salary every month. But at the same time, it's not a big corporate salary. I think sometimes people hear the word doctor and automatically think of a medical doctor or high-end corporate executive pay, and they assume the prestige of the title matches the bank account. And now the hardest part might not be the stipend itself, but it's the opportunity cost. You see your friends from undergrad go straight into finance, consulting, investment banking, and they get promotions or bonuses, whereas you may be stuck, depending on your funding body, on the same pay for about 4 years. So you might need to decide if the long-term career investment and the intellectual freedom is worth the financial sacrifice right now. The doctor title is amazing, but it doesn't pay the bills. So do it for the science, do it for the career you want later on in life, but do not expect that doing a PhD will make you wealthy. And now on to myth number 4, your research is going to be groundbreaking. I think a lot of people come into doing a PhD wanting to cure Alzheimer's, cancer, or to map the whole brain connectivity. And when you're writing your PhD proposal, this can feel huge. But the reality of doing a PhD is that you're contributing a tiny part to a massive wealth of knowledge. Most of the time, your results won't be cover of Nature material. And that's okay. A PhD is basically training, learning how to become a researcher. If you get a negative result, that is still a result. If you find out one tiny protein doesn't do what we thought it did, that is still science. If you go in thinking you're going to change the world by year 3, you might end up leaving miserable. You need to be able to find satisfaction in small wins. Getting a protocol to work after 3 tries, finally analysing a dataset and seeing a trend, or even just understanding really complex paper. No one's going to be clapping for you every day, so you need to learn how to clap for yourself. And this brings me to myth number 5, and this is the no life myth. There's kind of a toxic culture in academia that glorifies working on weekends, staying up late, and only thinking about science every minute of the day. And I'm not going to lie to you, there are some times before a big deadline or during a big experiment where the hours may be a bit long. And sometimes I am going to be in on a Saturday to feed my cells because they don't really care that it's the weekend. But this does not mean you need to sacrifice your life. You cannot think clearly about complex science if your brain is fried. You need rest. And my advice would be to treat a PhD like a 9-to-5 as much as you can. And yes, I get that sometimes that isn't possible, but the myth that you need to suffer for a PhD is actually kind of dangerous. You have to protect your peace. And this brings me to my final point, the myth that a PhD is just more school. When I tell people I'm doing a PhD, they often think that I'm sitting in lecture halls or going to seminars or taking exams at the end of every semester. But this cannot be further from the truth. A PhD isn't really like undergrad or even a master's. A PhD is not just studying, it's more like a job. You're a junior researcher, you're managing a budget, you're managing a project, and you're managing your own time. Also, you're producing knowledge, not just consuming it. In my program, I have no classes. I'm mainly in the lab or reading or analysing data. And it seems much more like a corporate manager role than just being a student. You have to take ownership as there's no syllabus telling you what to do every week. If you don't plan your experiments, they just don't happen. So if you're thinking about doing a PhD because you're good at taking tests and you like the structure of school, I do have some bad news for you. You have to be self-motivated and treat it like a career. So none of this means that doing a PhD is bad. I personally doing a PhD and I'm absolutely loving it. But it is important to go into it with your eyes wide open. It's not a glamorous path to riches and it's definitely not more school. But if you love science and you're willing to be resilient and you know that you don't have to be perfect, it can be incredibly rewarding. So if you like this video, please like and subscribe for more PhD tips and advice. And check out all my other videos. I'll see you in the next one.